stagnation, like not doing anything, is the worst thing you can do. Like, at least if you try something and you fail, you learn from it. So the next time you do it, you're able to avoid those mistakes. But doing nothing just means you're sitting there comfortable and you're just thinking about things to do, but you're never actually doing anything.
You're listening to the Kristof Lewis podcast, a podcast where I have conversations with inspirational people. My name is Chris, but my family calls me Kristof. My goal is to have as many conversations as possible with people who have forged their own path by pursuing their dreams, making them a reality, all the while emitting positivity and sharing this knowledge with others. I seek these people out and share this information with you, proving to the world that you can do what makes you happy and do what you want for a living while being a good human being. We'll talk about careers, but we'll also cover any story that inspires. Let's do this while helping each other. Thanks for listening. I'm happy you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to the Kristof Lewis podcast. This is conversation number 54. I'm very excited for my guest today. He is the one and only Colin Morgan. He is a former pro golfer and he's a fellow podcaster with over 1.5 million downloads, so super humbling to be able to talk to this guy. Right off the bat, we dove really deep into a wide array of topics and emotions. I'm telling you, over 30 minutes talking to this guy, we just covered so many topics, covered so many emotions, and there's a lot of value here. So stick around until the end, and I promise you, you will gain value from this conversation. I had a great time. So without further ado, welcome to the Kristof Lewis podcast.
Kristof, man, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're very welcome. We've been talking for a little while, and I've been so excited to get you on here. You're a fellow podcaster, as I was saying, and you are a former pro golfer. And I think that's just really awesome. I don't talk to a lot of professional athletes. And right off the bat, I want to dive real deep before we even tell everybody who you are. But I kind of want to know, like, as a pro athlete, obviously growing up, you had a certain mindset that got you to that. But did you, like, and I do air quotes for everybody listening, but when you became pro, did you notice like a shift in your mindset? Did you maybe, for example, like, oh man, I got to work really hard now to maintain what I have? Or did you notice any kind of shift whatsoever mentally?
Yeah, you know what? I think my journey is a little bit different, to be honest.
Okay.
I definitely think from a young age, I always had a vision and a belief that I would become a professional athlete. And from a young age, like really young, we're talking, I'm Canadian, so I always thought that'd be hockey. And then I realized, I'm not going to really reach that point. And I found some success in golf. And for me, that was the gateway. That was the vehicle that was going to drive me to ultimately becoming that professional athlete. And I fell in love with it. There came a point in time during my sort of athletic career where I went to university, and due to circumstances, I lost that passion. But because for me, I only had one vision. I only had one driver in my life, was to become a professional athlete. So I felt like my identity was linked towards that.
Absolutely.
So it was difficult for me to do anything else. So after 2 years of university where I left, I'm sitting back saying, what do I do? And I'm like, golf for me is the only option right now.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that I could see myself doing. So for me, it was more of like out of necessity of like, I don't know what to do anything else. I know I have the talent.
Yeah.
Deep down, I knew I would never make it. And that's just being completely honest. I think for a lot of people, that's hard to say, and it took me a while to really admit that.
You got to be honest, though. Absolutely. You have to admit that to yourself.
And it's difficult. And now that I look back on it, I'm like, for me, that was really my only option. So me looking and saying, what's the mindset? I mean, I still worked hard and I still practiced, and it still takes self-discipline. I still had coaches. I worked out. I did all the right things. But it takes a lot more than that. And I think that that's what I found out about life and entrepreneurship and sports. It takes more than effort.
Absolutely, it does. And to me, it's interesting that you always had this in your mind that you wanted to be a professional athlete. And just hearing the story, it's kind of sounded like you didn't really care what that entailed. Like you were joking, like being Canadian, I thought it was going to be hockey, and then it turned out to be pro golf. Yeah, I think that's So I'm glad you answered the question like that, because to me, it kind of means that this mentality was always there within your head, and you knew you wanted to achieve this level of greatness, and you didn't really know how you wanted to achieve it, but you knew that whatever avenue it eventually went down, that you were going to do what it took. And I think that kind of relates to some of the things that I tried to show in the podcast. So this is a great example, because a lot of times people don't really know what they want to do. So like one of the things I talk about a lot is like, how do you find your passion? And maybe you're already doing it, but I think if you have the idea and the mindset, as we're discussing, that you know you want to be great at something, but you don't really know what it is. I think if you just keep pushing in a forward direction with that mentality and never giving up, and always like, maybe hockey isn't right for me, or maybe, you said university wasn't right for you for 2 years, and then you found or golf, and then you did golf, and wow, what amazing things became of that. So I think that's very, very important to note there.
Yeah, and I think that exactly what you had said, I'm a big, huge believer in that stagnation, like not doing anything, is the worst thing you can do. Like, at least if you try something and you fail, you learn from it. So the next time you do it, you're able to avoid those mistakes. But doing nothing just means you're sitting there comfortable and you're just thinking about things to do, but you're never actually doing anything.
The comfortability kills you. And honestly, the stagnation, like, physically kills me. I was talking to somebody today about it, and they're like, wow, you would go crazy if you didn't have anything to do. And I was like, absolutely, I would go crazy. Like, I would not know what to do with my life. So always driving that, keeping that momentum, going forward, knowing I'm going to get knocked back sometimes, but at least moving in some direction, some way, just keeps my fire and my passion for life moving forward. And I think that's very important, because we've talked about comfortability a lot around here, and I know that's a very dangerous place to be. I never want to be there for too long, but I try to, and I'm interested on your take since we're here on comfortability. I know you kind of just touched on it a little bit, but I kind of have an issue. I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that always want something better of themselves, to do and to be better, is we're always seeking to better ourselves. So thus it's kind of hard to appreciate the successes that we've achieved as we achieve them. So I try to appreciate my successes more in the moment as I obtain them. So I'm, I guess, comfortable in the moment, temporarily, to enjoy what I've obtained, and then know that I have to continue pushing to better myself.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. You need to celebrate the little wins, because that pushes you forward. And I think that what I want to touch on with what you had mentioned there is, like, there are people listening, and I fit in this category, right, of like, maybe you aren't where you want to be at the moment. And if you want to make a lasting change, sort of the analogy that I use is a fist, right? So like when you hold up a fist, this is like the universal symbol for power for men and women, right? When we're angry, we make a fist, or when we win, we fist pump, right? And to make a fist, you need 5 pillars. And the very first one, which is the most important, is if you want to make a change, it's admitting that you need to change. And the reason why it's number 1 is because without that, there'll be no change. So you need to admit that what I've done so far maybe hasn't worked, and I need to change things up, and I need to be different, which leads to number 2. And the second finger, I hold up the middle finger. I'm not giving you guys the middle finger here, all right? But this is what I call self-awareness. So now you can become self-aware of those bad thoughts, those bad behaviors, those bad little things that pop up in your head that tell you you can't, or you're not smart enough, or it's not for you, it won't happen. And you can become aware of those moments. And now you can start to say, fuck off, that isn't me. Like, I'm different.
Absolutely.
Which leads to 3, right? And for 3, this is the ring finger. So for people married, I'm not, but this is like the honeymoon stage. This is where you see your greatest results, because you're able to now become self-aware, and you replace those losing behaviors with winning behaviors. And you start to see those early results. Like when you go to the gym for the first month, you see the biggest results, right? And then that leads to 4, which is the most difficult. This is like the easiest finger to break. People don't really think about it, but it's consistency.
Sure.
It's after you've seen those month results in the gym, how do you stick with it every day thereafter and make it a lifestyle, which is the only way you can do that, which is the last thing here that glues everything together in the fist. and that is having a vision and a purpose for what you want. And if you have that vision and purpose, it makes it very easy to stay consistent with what you're doing. So if you can kind of follow those 5 pillars, you'll make that positive change, but it starts with acceptance.
Absolutely. And with all of them, you're stronger. It's just like, I love talking about having friends that have the same vision and the same path that you want to have. You're stronger together when you can confide in them and you can feed off of each other's energy, right? So just like you described all your fingers together, like the pinky, it can break very easily, or all these fingers, frankly. Gosh, I know I've broken so many, but together, you know, it's very, very strong, and that's the best way to achieve whatever you quantify success as, and at least be headed in the right direction. I think that's a very good I'm going to have to somehow go back, and I will encapsulate that and put it into the show notes for everybody so they can actually see that and apply it to their lives. No, I think that's absolutely great, man. So I know we jumped into it kind of quick, but I think, like I said, it's really neat that you're a former pro golfer, and I love that. I played sports growing up my entire life. I'm from Colorado, snowboarded, soccer, football, track, all these things, and sports were just so important to form who I was, like being in leadership roles, suffering defeat, winning. How do you deal with all of these things? And I know you said you had this mindset in your head being a professional for your whole entire life, but did you play other sports as a child? And I'm curious, were they like team sports or individual sports? Because you said hockey, which is obviously a team sport, and then you ended up being a golfer, which is all on you.
Yeah, I played every and all sports growing up. I loved it. I think as I got a little bit older, I started to take a few more seriously.
Yeah.
I was actually a provincial champion in 4 different sports. So for those in the U.S., it'd be like equivalent to, I guess, a state champion.
Sure.
So I won in golf, hockey, tennis, and badminton, believe it or not.
Huh.
So those were the 4 sports that I mostly succeeded in.
You're a rock star.
I guess so, man. I don't look like an athlete, but I guess it comes somewhat to me. But yeah, for me, I just, for some reason, I connected with it.
Sure.
I connected with sports. It was just a big part of my life, and I wasn't the greatest student, but I mean, sports got me through, I guess, going through the little bit of school that I did.
Yeah, no, they do. Like, so, and that's a good segue into school too, but I did not enjoy school at all. Sports was like, they kept me there a lot of the times. Like I think the older I got, the more I skipped school, honestly. And I think I probably tried to stay in school enough to where they wouldn't like kick me off the team I was in for that season, or because I'd have to go, like, man, when I was playing football my senior year, like I had to go to early class or whatever to bring my grades up from an F to at least to get it to a D, like. And I didn't have that bad of a GPA, but there were some classes that I just absolutely suffered in, and I just didn't understand as a kid why I had to learn all that stuff because I had absolutely no interest. And then you flash forward like 10 years into my mid-20s, and I have this like life epiphany where I realize that I am so impassioned about furthering my education and learning that like what I just said, it was an epiphany. Like I became a new person in that moment. I mean, it wasn't an exact moment, but I have all these books behind me. Like I realized I love to read.
Yeah.
I hated reading in school. Did you have a similar experience? I mean, you got a ton of books, and I've listened to a lot of your stuff. Like you're very well educated, but it sounds like you didn't really like school either.
No, my education happened probably when I was like 22 years old is really when it started. And before that, I just did anything to kind of scrape by, and I took all the shortcuts in the world. And I think I look back on it and I'm like, it wasn't that I wasn't a smart kid, but I didn't understand why I needed it, just like you had said.
Yeah.
And if someone were to sit down to me and explain to me why I need to do it, I'd for sure be a great student. Like there's no doubt in my mind. And that's one thing I do look back and I'm like, I wish I was a better student, but we can all look back hindsight and want to change things. But for me, it's just like, I didn't know, like you had said, I didn't know what it would do for me. And I thought I was going to be a professional athlete. So I'm like,
I don't need it anymore.
What the hell does this algebra need to do with my golf swing other than maybe give me some swing tips here. Maybe it'll help. But I just had no connection to it. So it was hard for me to do anything towards that.
Yeah. It seems like, at least in my experience in formal education and all the schooling that I went to, and I went to a little college too, it didn't work out, dropped out, was so bored as well. because I was doing prerequisites because I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. But it seemed to me like all the teachers, all the just the adults in my life were like only giving me one option, like, hey, you have to go to school, you have to go to college, or you're just not going to be successful in life. And now looking back on it, I hate that. Like, I hate that that is the way that life was articulated to me, that this was the only path to success. Because now I've talked to 50 plus people on this, and I go, holy crap. Like, I mean, I've talked to some college professors, high school teachers, and, you know, if that's the path you want to take, so be it. Don't care. Like, if it works for you, great. But I would at least hope that we would encourage children that this isn't, you know, don't have tunnel vision on education and pursue what you enjoy. Because like you said, algebra didn't have any inclination to want to do that at all. I was the same way. Algebra, science, didn't enjoy it at all, but I love to write and talk to people like I'm doing right now. I love to do that, hang out with friends and have like deep conversations. So funny, like here I am now. But like, why don't we encourage kids to do this more often? You know, it's crazy.
I think we're moving towards that. Like, I don't think that maybe that was, and I had the same type of advice, right? You have to go to school in order to be successful. And that came from a place of love because that's what they grew up.
Sure.
That was a time in which they grew up where that was taught to them by their parents.
Yeah.
So now, as I think that we, as the generation that we're in, as we get more educated and understand that we don't have to go to university. And a lot of times, even if you want a job from a big corporation or company, they don't require education anymore. And understanding that's a really big thing. And I think that we're moving towards that.
Yeah.
And I think that over time, maybe I always think education will be important because I think it does teach you to start something and finish something. And it teaches you discipline, gets you around people. I mean, that was the biggest thing I didn't have a great experience at university, but the best thing about it was the people I met. Right. Like it's getting around those people. And I mean, I take it for what it is, but I think you're right. We're moving towards a time in which it's not that important anymore in order to go to university to be successful.
I mean, yeah, like think about social media, YouTube, everything on the internet is a tool to learn, right? So you can literally YouTube anything. You can find anything that interests you on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find the profession on LinkedIn that you want to, if you feel like you need to do something or you want to do something, just type it in and you can find thousands and millions of people that do what you want to do. And then you can connect with them, send them messages. We're living in a time where the possibilities are endless. And I think, you know, before the internet, maybe sitting in the classroom, like you were describing, like the generations past, this was the only option for the most part.
It's the only way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand that tunnel vision, if you will, but now that there's literally unlimited options, I mean, I'm learning from you. I hope I'm giving you some value in some way, at least helping you jog your mind.
Always.
Right? So things like this, there are just unlimited options. And that's why I absolutely am so happy to see the way we're moving, because these things are becoming more accepted. And I always am quick to, I hear so many people bash social media, and I'm always very quick to stick up for social media because I always describe it as a tool. And if you want to, you know, waste your mind mindlessly on it, then so be it. But you could do the same thing in school like I did. But
of course,
you know, the kids that crushed school, and if they wanted to be doctors or lawyers, then that was a great path for them. That wasn't my path. But now I'm crushing social media as much as I can, you know, checking out YouTube video, reading books that interest me. And so I'm crushing my life now in that direction. So that was really, really important for me. And then I actually talked to a teacher earlier this week, and I asked her, and she said, I really think that we're teaching more emotional intelligence in schools as well. So I was very happy to hear that as well, because, you know, that comes up a lot too. And I think we have so many issues as adults that I think that if we didn't, like we were talking about this single mindset about education, right? So, but if we implemented these other things like emotional intelligence in children as well, and maybe had classes about that as well, then we could just all encompassingly help children become better adults as they grow up.
Yeah, we need to develop good people. And I think it starts with people, because I think that a lot of times I look at, say, sports teams, and I look at how universities are run and how, you know, we grow up in a society where people in leadership roles can take advantage of you as a kid. And it's happened to me. And a lot of times when you are in as a leader, it's not even like they mean to. So I don't want to preface this. I don't believe that they mean to do it. But I think anytime you have power over someone, it's easy to start getting in a downward spiral of doing things that aren't what you should be doing. And I think that may always be the case, because anytime you do have power, a lot of times it goes to people's head, and not in every case, but in a lot of them. And I think if we start to educate people on that and start to shed a light on that, I think that's really the difference that can be made, instead of focusing on trying to help the leaders, because the leaders wash through so often. But yeah, I think social media, it shows insecurities. And if you're insecure with yourself, I think it can be a really dangerous thing.
It's tough to deal with. I mean, I know I've given the example of, I remember like the first time I flipped the camera on myself, I knew I wanted to share my story, or started to want to share it, like very, very small. And I just know, like, I was so insecure about it's tough, you know. First time you're behind the camera, I'm sure you experienced something similarly too, but I had to get...
In the first 20 podcasts, I had to do shirtless. I'm sweating so much. Like, it sucked. I hated my voice. Like, you pick on yourself. It's crazy.
You do. You are definitely your worst critic. Like, I'm really bad. I'm really bad at that. It goes back to what I was saying before, like trying to celebrate my wins more often in the moment. A lot of it has to do with each other, but most definitely I had to overcome that. It was very vulnerable, but I knew that in sharing my story and sharing my life experiences, that it would ultimately resonate with somebody else out there, and maybe not everybody. You know, we talk about so many different topics, you talk about so many different topics, and it's not going to resonate with everybody that hears it. But I would hope, just like when you're reading a book or you're listening to the news, you don't just automatically take in what they say as the truth, of course, especially nowadays. But you want to hear a little bit from here. And like books, like I have plenty of good books behind me. I don't agree with them from cover to cover, but there are some that I agree with more, some that I agree with less. And I pick out all the little things from all the books, and then I formulate my own opinions based, you know, it coupled with my life experiences. So I would encourage that as well. So that, coupled with teaching children from a young age the emotional intelligence and teaching them that you don't have to go down this path of formal education. But I will say that you said at some point, like, that structure is very helpful to have a child learn overcoming all of these things. So I would agree with that very much. And I think that's difficult. And, you know, I got a 1-month-old now, so these are things that I'm thinking about even more. Like, how is she going to be affected in school, or how is she going to be taught? What are these adults now that I can be critical of too, because they may not be implementing in their own lives? How are they going to teach my daughter? So I got a lot of crazy things running on in my head right now.
No doubt. It's crazy, man. It's one of the most difficult. I see my brother and sister, they go through it. They both have kids, and it's tough. It's tough to know exactly what to do and how to set them up for life success. And you can only teach them maybe what you've been through. It's a challenge.
Yeah, and so that's a good point. Like, teach them what you've been through, right? So based on those experiences and all the things we were saying, like self-education, you want to lead by example. So I've never been a parent before, but I know, like, what I'm going to try to do to be that good parent is just lead by example. So I don't, you know, whatever, you know, you can only do as much as you can do when you're at home. And when they go off into school, like you said, it's good to have that association with other children, to maybe see how other adults conduct themselves, and other adults that have, you know, in those power states, how they adults quite literally. So I think that if you do the best you can as a leader, and then your kid ships off, and then, you know, maybe if people do things differently, then your daughter or your son comes home and they ask you questions, well, Mrs. So-and-so did it this way or said this way, and then you tell them about this. And I think I would always want to describe that to my children in a sense of, maybe they aren't wrong or they aren't right, but I kind of want to, again, divulge the facts for my child. And then, you know, depending on what age she is too, like, I don't know, I'm figuring it out. Like, I'm literally thinking about this as I'm telling you, but hopefully give her all the facts, and then she can make up her own mind. I don't really want to force her to make her own mind up, right? Like, for example, if you're in an argument or a conversation with somebody and you disagree with them, you don't want to just yell at them and bash what they believe in, because they're automatically going to discount you. You want to, right? You want to give them all the facts that you know, and it will further kind of fortify why you believe that way. And then, you know, hopefully that person sees it as you do, and you come to a conclusion that way. And I think that's one thing I would try to do in parenting. Absolutely. But who knows right now?
Yeah,
you know, I'm saying it's barely into the game.
It's tough. I mean, I had phenomenal parents. I had one of the most ideal upbringings you possibly have. Was I sheltered? Maybe, to an extent. I feel like, if anything, I wish I experienced more, because when I did get in a situation in university where you're around new people, and for me in college, for athletes, a lot of times you feel like that's the gateway to the next level.
Okay.
And me being a professional athlete, like I felt like had to go to college, had to do a great job, then it would move on to the pros. And I would do anything to stay in university. Like, you do anything to make your coach happy. You do anything to stay around your teammates. And that's a really vulnerable position that you could put yourself in. Yeah. And for me personally, I mean, that's what led to a lot of mentally, physically, and sexually abused in university for myself. And it's one of those things where I look back on it and I'm like, it's the vulnerability that happens. And there's nothing that you can really change, because your parents want to put you in the best situation possible, and it's not their fault at all. Yeah. But the more I believe you can just let your kids know that here are the signs, here's what you can look out for, here's what you need to be doing, just create a well-rounded person, I think that they can make those decisions and they can see those warning signs and not go through maybe what I and others go through.
So that's a great point.
But like anything else, it's tough.
So you were so willing to, like you said, please all these people in your life to be able to have those opportunities because you thought this was the only path, that you put yourself in positions that don't sound like they were too great.
No, I mean, it's not my fault, like either. Like, I look back and I'm like, a lot of times I believed it was my fault, and now I look at everything that happened. And when you're in almost like a cult-like society, I bet, like, you want to make the people around you, so you want to please the leader, right? You want to please the people who empower the people who have influence over you. And when they give you attention and then they take it away,
super dangerous,
but then they give it back,
unhealthy.
And then all of a sudden you're stuck, right? And you're like, you do things that, like, what the hell was I doing? Yeah, it's crazy. So, and that's why you see on. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. So I was a college dropout and I didn't play sports in college. Like, so do you see this? I'm like curious. Do you see this often? I feel like there's a lot of people that have the hopes and desires and dreams that you have. They share that with you. Do you think this has been an issue? Like, it's prevalent? I think it's happening way more than we think.
If it can happen to someone at a small university in the States, it's happening everywhere.
Sure.
And I believe that 100%. I believe it's happening everywhere, and it's probably happening way more with women than it is for men. Mm-hmm. And I think that people turn a blind eye to it because you make money, right? Universities are making money off of this. People make money off of this, and you're able to exploit. You don't think about people. You think about what's the final product. And a lot of time as a business or an entity, you think of, how do I make the most amount of money out of this?
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to, and then someone sheds a light on it and you want to hide it because you don't want your reputation to take a hit.
Absolutely.
And everything gets buried. And the people who are responsible for what happened never answer for it because you have that big faction behind you and it gets buried. I think this happens so much. I look at, I'm just speaking of my girlfriend, Yesha. I'm like, I look at university sports and I look at college sports. I look at, it's dangerous. I view it as really dangerous. It can be. I think a lot of times people don't have that happen. 99.9% don't, but it's the 1% that I'm scared about.
And 1% is a lot of people when you're talking about that. And I've thought about the collegiate system in that sense of how it's really, in this, my opinion, is a money-making machine. Like, I think, at least in the States, people pay way too much money to have an education, especially nowadays with so many other options. And you're right. I think they're just a lot of times worried about what's going to bring the most money in. And it's super sad. Like, it's sad hearing you talk about that, for real. And
it is.
It just, I lose my words. And you just wonder, because the people, like you said, that are responsible for this manipulation and everything else that comes along with it are never held responsible for the most part.
For the most part, and for a big part.
For a big part, yeah.
And people, I've had a friend close to me, buddy took his life 2.5 years ago because of it, and it's just,
sorry to hear that.
It's happening it happens, and there needs to be a light show. There needs to be people talking about it. You need to share your story, because without it, nothing changes. It just continuously, the cycle, wash and repeat, happens again. Bury it, move forward, take someone else. It's like I said, it doesn't happen to everyone, and for the most part, it's amazing. But there needs to be something in place in which you can watch what's going on. You know what's going on. There's sanctions in place. Even though you're a leader, you're being held accountable, because every week or every month there's someone there checking. But that's just not the case right now.
All of these things that we've said throughout the podcast are just coming together right now, honestly. Like flipping the camera on yourself, first dealing with it as much as you possibly can within yourself, and then knowing that somebody else is going through it. So share your story. Like, so I was in the Navy for 9 years. I haven't even shared the tip of the iceberg on a lot of the things that I've experienced, but I intend to. And I know, because I'm still trying to articulate them myself, quite frankly. Like, it can be difficult, but so at least I've got the camera thing down, kind of. But I fully plan on doing that as well. And I know there's other people that, millions of other people that deal with that as well. So thank God there are people like you that are willing to talk about it, willing to open up and share, like, hey, I went through this and it sucked and it's really tough and this is how I feel about it. And then somebody else hears that and we help more people. And just again, going in full circle, like, we're talking about pursuing success and how, 5 fingers make each other stronger. Well, at the same time, when we all deal with these things, like, man, to experience something that somebody else has gone through very similar like you, or at the same time as you, brings you such a close bond. So I would highly recommend people take your advice, and if you are struggling with something, to definitely think about it yourself long and hard. Think about why you would want to share that, and ultimately I would recommend to share it, because I know for a fact when somebody else hears that, it encourages them. And I know, like, my wife have gone through some tough stuff together, and she reached out to other wives, and I tell you, there was such a shift mentally when she was able to resonate with somebody else that had gone through the same exact thing as her.
It's a healing process for you as well. Like, that pain that someone could be holding in because you don't think that you should share it, or you're embarrassed, or you're ashamed, or whatever it is. Like, when you release it, there's just like I feel it now. Like, I'm talking with you, I feel it now. There's just this, like, there's a weight that comes off because you're doing the right thing. And when you do the right thing, it's just like the energy comes to you and it comes through you. And I truly believe amazing things that happen.
It's so mutually beneficial. Sharing one story not only helps somebody else, but it helps yourself. And I couldn't be more excited for this conversation in totality, because we've covered such a wide array of emotions and topics, like, from the start, man. I really appreciate you just being here with me and talking about this and diving deep into so many subjects. Like, it was really awesome. And I know that, again, like, in sharing our stories and just how we feel about stuff, like, hey, you're not going to always agree with everything I said or everything Colin said, but I hope you take a little bits and pieces from it. And through your own life experiences, coupled with what we've said and all the other education that you do, that I would highly recommend to maintain, formulate your own opinion and go on about life leading as best as you possibly can. Thank you so much for your time, Colin. Thank you, man. You have an amazing platform here. You're doing amazing things. Keep pushing. Everyone keep grinding. Pursue your future self. I love it. Thanks so much. All right, Colin. See ya. Cheers.